In this lesson, we're going to take a look at the points in the American Revolution that are relevant for the United States history regions. Those of you that are looking for a battlefield blow-by-blow of the war are going to be a bit disappointed. So it's safe to say that the war starts out as a real mismatch. You have essentially on the colonial side, the Continental Army, led by General George Washington, is a bunch of farmers with guns. And they're about to go up against the greatest army in the world, the British Army. But you can see here the colonists are not without some significant advantages. All right, they are fighting on their home turf. The British are coming across an entire ocean and really would prefer not to be there if they didn't have to be there. They weren't fighting with passion the way that the colonists were. All right, but probably the single biggest colonial advantage is General Washington himself. General Washington understood what needed to be done here, and I'll get into more of what I mean in a moment. You can see here in terms of the strategy, the British plan was to isolate the New England colonies. All right, you can connect certain lakes. If I can I'll move to a map in a minute, and I'll show you. But the Lake Champlain, down through Lake George and the Hudson River. All right, as if we connect those, we kind of cut off the New England colonies from the rest of the colonies. All right, so it was the British strategy was a divide and conquer strategy. All right, I was talking about the brilliance of George Washington as commander because he understood that what he needed to do was keep the military, the Continental Army, alive. Literally make sure they didn't get completely destroyed. All right, because as long as the Continental Army was alive, then the idea of independence was alive. So his tactics are what we would call modern day guerrilla tactics, hit and run, which was considered very dishonorable at the time, but Washington also known, had he gone on to an open battlefield lined up against the military and what was standard at the time, they would have gotten slaughtered, the military would have gotten destroyed, and independence, the idea of independence, would have been gone. So Washington knew he had to keep the army alive until other folks would come to help, i.e. France. Now this map kind of shows what I was trying to get at before. If you see Montreal up here, all right, if we come south from Montreal, you have Lake Champlain, which Burgoyne is basically coming down here. All right, then you've got Lake George before we get to the Hudson River just north of Albany, which comes all the way south to New York City. So if the British can take sort of this line of water, all right, they can now cut off the New England colonies from the rest of the colonies. So that's the British plan, and while it's not executed to quite the way the British would like, you can see that along the coast, the British are going to take the major cities along the coast. All right, the Continental Army is in red, and the British Army is in blue here. So you see the where the Continental Army is not without a few small victories, but really the fighting in the north is largely going in favor of the British. All right. The exception here is the one key battle that we need to talk about, and that's the Battle of Saratoga, happened on October 17th of 1777. This was the turning point battle. All right. France had made clear to us there was no way that they were coming in until we could prove ourselves on the field of battle in a traditional lineup, open field, men lined up, 2 or 3 deep, fighting each other, closing in on each other to hand-to-hand combat. All right, Saratoga's that battle. All right, and we win it. All right, and so the reason it's the turning point battle is that it's after Saratoga that the French agree to come in. And the South had actually the largest degree of loyalists, uh, but strangely enough, things are going to work out so that the final battle is going to take place in the South, and it's going to be a continental victory, and the victory that ends the war, and that's right here in Yorktown. And what you have is essentially a key British mistake, where Lord Cornwallis ends up on what you can see here, the Yorktown Peninsula. This is a peninsula where he's got all of his soldiers there waiting for the British Navy to come and pick him up and bring him out of the Chesapeake and take him back north. If memory serves, it's to New York City was the plan. But what ends up happening is that the French Navy comes in and shuts the entrance to the Chesapeake Bay. This is the Chesapeake Bay here, and it's the only way in and out to the Atlantic Ocean. And Washington finds out quickly, so you've got Washington that comes down. All right, you see Lafayette here. It's so that the Cornwallis and his men are trapped. All right, so you've got the Continental Army that essentially forms a line on land, and of course Cornwallis can't get out by sea. And over the next several weeks, they push Cornwallis to the edge of the peninsula, and now at this point, out of food and ammunition and whatnot, he's got no real choice but to surrender. All right, that's October 19th, 1781, Battle of Yorktown, and that's going to end the American Revolution. All right, so you can see here on the map that we're looking at the United States, as you see pictured here on the map. Let me make this a little bit larger here. All right, the British are going to retain Canada as a colony. All right, so you see do note the western boundary of the original United States is the Mississippi River. The Treaty of Paris is the official ending of the war. The peace treaty is signed. Great Britain, you can see, recognizes the United States and its right to exist. The U.S.-Canadian border boundary is set. Mississippi River is our western boundary. Florida is returned to Spain, and Great Britain removed its troops from the United States. All right. Lastly here then, effects of the American Revolution. This you can see here, and I've circled the one on the left, which is the one that we really need to concentrate on. This revolution and the ideals that we learned about in the Declaration of Independence are going to spark other people to throw governments off. And you see here, typewritten France. The French Revolution is 1789. The Spanish colonies are going to overthrow Spain in 1808, really between 1808 and 1821 in what was New Spain at the time. So our Revolutionary War and the ideals behind that war, which are enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, are going to have an effect elsewhere around the world. And I'd also like to point out here this one, that issues surrounding slavery and the freeing of slaves begin to happen during this war as well. We're going to see, I don't think I have it in another slide here. No, I don't. But the northern states are going to start down the road of freeing their slaves, and we will pick that up in lessons in other units going forward from here. But to summarize, all right, the brilliance of George Washington as the Continental Army commander was that he understood the need to keep that army alive. All right, and used whatever tactics he needed to. All right, hiding behind trees to ambush an army, a British unit walking up the road kind of thing. Considered very unprofessional at the time. He did what he needed to do to keep the Continental Army alive until the French came in to really help us win the war. The Battle of Saratoga is the turning point battle, all right, because it's after that battle the French agreed to join our fight. And then ultimately, of course, Britain is going to lose, um, some of which is honestly a stroke of luck, a good bit of luck that falls to the Patriot Army, and they agree to recognize the United States of America. And lastly, the revolution, as we spoke about, had an impact on other areas of the world, not the least of which was the French Revolution and the Spanish colonies. All right, that brings us to the end of both this war and the unit.